Hey guys, welcome back to more Reddit revenge stories. In this Ripestories video, I spent months building a $45 million project that changed my company, and then my boss took all the credit and got me fired. 2 decades later, we ended up on opposite sides of a deal that would decide his entire company's future. Let's dive right into the video. And the first one is titled, "Boss Stole My Promotion and Fired Me. 20 years later, I Get Revenge." So back in 2003, I was working as a senior project manager at a construction management firm in Denver called Bridgepoint Construction Services, name changed for privacy reasons. I'd been there for 8 years, working my way up from assistant project manager to managing some pretty significant commercial projects. Strip malls, office buildings, a few hotels, nothing too glamorous, but solid work, and I was really good at my job. My specialty was value engineering and schedule optimization. I could look at a set of plans and find ways to achieve the same result with better materials or more efficient sequencing. On one retail project alone, I saved the client $340,000 by suggesting that we switch from a traditional steel frame to a hybrid system for a section that did not require the original spec. The structural engineer signed off, the architect was happy, and the client loved me for it. So that is the kind of forward thinking that made me valuable, because I understood how all the pieces fit together, design, schedule, budget, subcontractor coordination, and I knew exactly how to make projects work even when crap hit the fan. In early 2003, our company got an RFP for a massive mixed-use development project. A real estate investment group wanted to build a complex with retail space, 2 office towers and a parking structure in downtown Denver. The estimated construction value was around $45 million, which was absolutely enormous for us at the time. This was not just another project, this was the kind of contract that could define a company's reputation and blow the doors wide open to bigger things down the line. The CEO promptly assigned me to lead the proposal development, and for 3 solid months I lived and breathed that proposal. I coordinated with architects, met with potential subcontractors to get preliminary pricing, developed the project schedule, identified risks and mitigation strategies, and put together a painstakingly detailed cost breakdown. I worked nights and weekends, calling in favors from subcontractors I built strong relationships with over the years to get us the most competitive pricing possible. I personally visited the site a dozen times to understand the physical logistics, access points, staging areas, utility locations, all of it. The day we finally submitted the proposal, the CEO took me out for drinks. He told me that when we won this contract, which he was confident we would, I would be looking at a VP position. "This is your project," he told me. "You built this proposal. When we land it, you're gonna be running major projects at the executive level. I'll make it happen." He seemed entirely sincere, and I had absolutely no reason to doubt him after 8 loyal years of grinding for his company. 2 weeks later, we won the contract, and I remember getting the call and feeling like all that exhausted grinding had finally paid off. The CEO called a company-wide meeting to announce the big win, and everyone in the office was buzzing. This was gonna put Bridgepoint on the map. Then the CEO made another announcement. He was creating a brand new position, VP of Major Projects. This person would oversee all projects over $20 million and report directly to him. I was sitting in my chair thinking, this is it. He promised me. But then, imagine a drumroll, he announced that Richard Douchebag would be taking the position. Richard ducking Douchebag. The guy had been hired barely 6 months earlier as a senior project manager after the CEO's brother-in-law recommended him. Richard had previously worked at a large national firm, but I'd heard through my own industry contacts that he had been quietly pushed out after a high-profile project went severely over budget. He had a fancy MBA and talked a great game in boardroom meetings, but in the 6 months he had been at Bridgepoint, I had not seen him actually manage a single thing successfully. He was great at PowerPoints and throwing around executive buzzwords, but when it came to the actual grunt work, aka coordinating trades, solving problems on the fly, managing client relationships on the ground, he was mediocre at best, and now he was my boss. The CEO explained to the room that Richard's extensive experience at the executive level made him the right fit for this strategic role. I felt like I'd been violently punched in the stomach. I just spent 3 months of my life building the proposal that won us this massive contract, and my reward was getting passed over for some guy the CEO's brother-in-law vouched for. After the meeting wrapped up, I went straight to the CEO's office. I asked him directly about the promise he had made me over drinks. He got visibly uncomfortable and backpedaled, saying the board felt Richard's background was a better fit for the executive role, but that I would still be heavily involved as a senior project manager. "You're still gonna be essential to this project's success," he said. "Richard handles strategic direction and you handle day-to-day execution. It's still a great opportunity for you." Translation: you do all the heavy lifting and Richard gets all the glory. And by the way guys, if your boss offered you this in that moment, what would you have said / what would you have done? Would you have quit your job on the spot or would you have gone along with it? Let me know in the comments, and if you still enjoy these stories, please don't forget to like the video and post some star emojis in the comments if you want to help me with the algorithm. Thank you so much. I should have quit right then and there, but I had a mortgage and 2 kids in school, and the job market in 2003 was not exactly booming. I told myself I'd stick it out, keep my head down, do good work, and start looking for something else on the side. The project officially kicked off in June 2003 with Richard as my official boss, meaning I reported to him instead of directly to the CEO, and from day one it was painfully obvious that Richard was in completely over his head. He didn't understand basic construction sequencing, he couldn't even read structural drawings properly to save his life, and he had zero relationships with any of the local subcontractors, but holy hell, was he good at taking credit for my work. I would spend hours developing complex solutions to site problems, write up detailed memos explaining the issues, and my recommendations, send them to Richard, and then sit in the conference room and watch him present my work to the CEO and the client as if he had conceptualized it all himself. He would literally take my words and repeat them verbatim in meetings. It was never, "My team developed this," or "Our senior PM identified this." It was always, "I think we should," and "My analysis shows," every single time. And the absolute worst part? Everyone bought it. Richard had that polished executive aura, the right expensive clothes, the confident tone, the slick MBA vocabulary. When he presented my ideas, people nodded along and acted deeply impressed. Whenever I tried to speak up or add context in those meetings, he would subtly cut me off or talk over me. He had the credit-stealing thing down to a precise art form. About 4 months in, we hit a major crisis when our steel supplier called on a Friday afternoon to say they couldn't deliver the structural steel for the first office tower on schedule. They were having mill problems and we were suddenly looking at a 6-week delay, which was a total disaster. The schedule was incredibly tight and a delay that long would trigger severe penalty clauses in our contract worth hundreds of thousands of dollars. I spent the entire weekend glued to the phone calling every single steel supplier and fabricator I knew across the region. And then, by Sunday night, I had miraculously found a fabricator in Kansas City who had just had another project fall through and actually had capacity for us. Their pricing was slightly higher, but they guaranteed that they could deliver on our original schedule if we got them the shop drawings by Wednesday. I negotiated the price down slightly, got a firm commitment letter, and worked out a rushed plan to expedite the shop drawing approval Sunday night at exactly 11:47 p.m. I emailed Richard a highly detailed write-up of the problem and my solution, the alternative supplier, the cost impact, and the exact action items for Monday morning. I handed him the whole thing wrapped up with a neat little bow. Come Monday morning, Richard sent a company-wide email to the CEO and the board using almost my exact wording. He completely copied and pasted my analysis, presenting it as his own brilliant 11th hour crisis management, and never even mentioned my name once. I only found out because I was accidentally copied on a reply from a board member who wrote, "Great strategic thinking, Richard. This is exactly the kind of executive-level problem-solving we need." I still had my original email timestamped 11:47 p.m. Sunday night sitting in my sent folder, but what could I realistically do here? If I complained to HR, I would just look bitter and petty. Richard was the VP and I was just a PM. The corporate hierarchy was clear and that hierarchy protected him. This infuriating dynamic went on for months. I did the grueling work and Richard took all the credit. The project itself was going phenomenally well under budget and perfectly on schedule, but nobody upstairs seemed to realize that was entirely because of my daily grinding and not Richard's empty strategic leadership. Then came the incident that finally got me fired. The client's CEO scheduled a major site visit to see the progress on the first office tower. It was a huge deal. He was bringing his board members and wanted a comprehensive tour and presentation, which Richard was officially supposed to lead. I was only supposed to be there in the background to handle the highly technical questions. Morning of the big visit arrives and Richard does not show up. I called his cell, there was no answer. Called his house, nothing. The client CEO and his powerful board members then arrive at 9 AM sharp, hard hats on, and Richard is absolutely nowhere to be found. I had to make an immediate judgment call because I couldn't just leave these important people standing around in the dirt on a construction site looking at their watches. I stepped up, introduced myself, smoothly apologized that Richard had been unavoidably delayed, and I ran the entire tour myself. I confidently walked them through the completed foundation work, explained the complex steel erection schedule I had saved, covered all our safety protocols, and expertly answered every single question they threw at me. I'd been managing the guts of this project day to day for months. I knew every single detail completely cold. The client CEO actually pulled me aside afterwards, shook my hand and said, "This was excellent. You clearly know exactly what you're doing." I'm genuinely impressed with how tightly this project is being managed. Then Richard finally rolled onto the site 2 hours later, just as the client's SUVs were actually driving away, and he muttered something about a vague family emergency that apparently prevented him from calling or texting a single person in the company. The client CEO was already gone, meaning Richard had missed the most important visit of the year. I honestly figured that he would at least pull me aside and thank me for saving his ass. But no, instead that very same day Richard filed a formal HR complaint against me for so-called insubordination and attempting to undermine executive authority by taking over a presentation without authorization. Let the absolute sheer audacity of that sink in. He no-shows to the most critical client meeting of the year, I step in and nail it to save the company's reputation, and he formally writes me up for it. 3 days later, HR solemnly calls me into a sterile room to say there's been a serious complaint about my conduct during the client visit. I was then placed on administrative leave pending an investigation, and though I desperately tried to explain that Richard hadn't shown up and I'd saved the meeting from being a complete embarrassment, the HR drone just kept coldly repeating, "We need to follow proper procedure," and "This is standard protocol for executive complaints." A week later, I was officially fired. The documented reason? Conduct inconsistent with company values and insubordination towards executive leadership. They gave me 2 weeks severance and marched me out of the building with a cardboard box of my things like I was a common criminal. I was 38 years old, had given 8 loyal years to the company, and was suddenly unemployed strictly because I'd successfully managed a client meeting that my incompetent boss had completely blown off. The sheer blinding injustice of it kept me up, staring at the ceiling at night. For the first few weeks, I was an absolute wreck. I woke up angry and went to bed angry. I kept obsessively replaying everything: the stolen promotion, the stolen credit, the humiliating firing, and my wife was deeply worried about me. I was worried about me, but after about a month of bitter stewing, I made a firm decision. I could let this entirely destroy my spirit, or I could channel that white-hot anger into building something much better. Sitting around feeling sorry for myself on the couch was not gonna pay my mortgage or put food on the table for my kids, so I reached out to every single contact I had cultivated in the industry. I took people out for coffee, bought lunches, and made it crystal clear I was looking for a new home. I didn't badmouth Bridgepoint or Richard to anyone. I'd been around long enough to know that that kind of petty mudslinging always backfires. I just professionally stated that the position was not the right fit anymore and that I was actively looking for somewhere I could truly grow, and within 2 short months I landed on my feet at a much larger firm called Summit Construction Group, again name change for privacy reasons, out there in Phoenix. It offered better pay, significantly bigger projects, and most importantly, a leadership team that actively valued people who actually did the hard work rather than people who just talked endlessly about it. It was a completely fresh start, and I was fiercely determined to make the absolute most of it. I threw myself into the job with everything I had. Every single project I managed came in perfectly on time and well under budget. I built rock-solid relationships with our clients and subs, and quickly developing a stellar reputation as the reliable guy who could handle the most complex projects and solve the intricate problems that other people could not figure out. Within 3 years, my hard work paid off and I was promoted to VP of Operations. Within 6 years, I made partner in the firm. The distinct difference was that at Summit, actual competence mattered. The leadership team had all come up through the trenches of project management, they fundamentally understood construction, and they knew the vast difference between someone who could talk a good game and someone who could actually deliver results. For the first time, I finally felt like I was being respected and valued for what I could actually do. Over the years, I would occasionally hear things about Bridgepoint through some industry gossip. Remember that $45 million project I'd poured my soul into helping them win? Well, it finished incredibly late and massively over budget after I left because Richard could not maintain the vital subcontractor relationships I'd built, and the client was famously furious. Bridgepoint managed to land a few more decent projects after that, but nothing even close to that first big win. The incredible momentum I'd helped them create just slowly fizzled out under Richard's leadership. In 2015, the original CEO finally retired and sold the company directly to Richard, who vanity renamed it Douchebag Project Solutions and desperately tried to rebrand it as a so-called boutique high-end construction management firm. From what I heard, it was doing just okay, scraping by on smaller projects, but nothing spectacular anymore. Honestly, I didn't think much about it at the time. I was too busy helping build Summit into one of the most dominant firms in the Southwest. Richard was just a closed chapter from my distant past, but then 2023 happened. A major real estate development group formally issued an RFP for a massive landscape-changing mixed-use project in Phoenix. It was a very similar concept to that original Denver project that had changed my career trajectory 20 years prior, but scaled up massively. A $200 million estimated construction value. It had retail, office space, high-end residential, complex underground parking, the whole massive deal. Summit aggressively went after it, and as a partner I was heavily and personally involved in building the proposal. We spent 4 grueling months putting together something truly comprehensive and bulletproof, and I personally handled the delicate subcontractor negotiations because I still maintained deep, trusting relationships across the entire industry. When we finally submitted our bid, I looked through the public list of competing firms. The usual suspects were all there: massive national firms, regional competitors we knew intimately, and of course Douchebag Project Solutions, Richard's company. I won't pretend I didn't feel a sudden, sharp jolt when I saw that name on the roster. After 20 years we were finally competing head-to-head, and I deeply, fiercely wanted to win. Not just for Summit's bottom line, but for me. I wanted to look him in the eye and beat him. The client eventually narrowed the massive field down to 3 finalists. Summit and Douchebag Project Solutions both made the final cut. The critical in-person presentations were scheduled for a Tuesday in October 2023. I heard all about Richard's presentation afterwards through a trusted client contact who had been sitting in the room. He had done his exact usual song and dance, heavy on strategic vision and innovative approaches, but noticeably light on actual tangible details. When the board asked him specific probing questions about concrete sequencing and site logistics, he was vague and evasive. He just kept repeating that his team would handle those minor details, but could not explain how. Same old Richard, you know. All sizzle, absolutely no steak. Our presentation, however, was the complete opposite. I stood up and confidently walked them through exactly how we would sequence the complex work, which specific subs we would use and why, exactly how we would handle the tight specific site challenges, and what our daily communication protocols would be. When they fired off questions, I had specific data-backed answers ready, supported by real examples from complex projects we had recently completed. I was not just selling them a glossy vision, I was actually showing them exactly, brick by brick, how we would build their project. The client CEO actually stopped me midway throughout the presentation and said, "This is exactly what we need to see. This is a team that actually understands the reality of construction." So in short, we won the massive contract. The client had called me personally to deliver the news, stating that ours was the only proposal that gave them genuine confidence. We actually knew what we were doing rather than just talking a good game. Beating Richard fair and square on pure merit felt absolutely incredible, but that was not the end of the story. That was just the beginning of the end for him. Now here's where I have to be completely honest, what I did next I'm not entirely proud of. But I don't lose a single second of sleep over it either. After we successfully won that contract, I started making some quiet calls, some casual conversations with my extensive network of contacts at various firms and development groups that I knew were actively considering bids from Douchebag Project Solutions. I absolutely did not badmouth Richard directly, I'm not stupid, and in this tight-knit industry that stuff always comes back around to bite you. But when a colleague at another development firm casually mentioned they were looking at Douchebag Project Solutions for an upcoming build, I would say something carefully phrased like, "Really?" I've heard some concerning things about their completion record lately. You might want to do some extra due diligence. Check with their subcontractors about their recent payment timelines. That's literally all it takes in the world of high-stakes construction. Your reputation is the whole ballgame, and once people start asking the right pointed questions, the ugly truth has a way of surfacing completely on its own. Richard's company had silently left a massive trail of budget overruns, missed deadlines, and severely unhappy subcontractors in its wake. I didn't have to lie, fabricate, or exaggerate a single thing. I just had to kindly point people towards looking a little closer at the evidence that was already there. Over the next few months, I had a similar strategic conversation with a handful of powerful contacts, stuff like, have you checked their references thoroughly? I'd make sure to talk to people who have worked with them recently, not just a curated reference list I handed you. Make sure you independently verify their bonding capacity for a project that size. Every single one of those potential clients did their homework and ended up going with other firms. Not always mine, I was not trying to monopolize all his business for Summit, I just wanted to make absolutely sure the cold hard truth about his company's actual performance was part of the conversation, and just like dominoes, everything started rapidly falling over the next year and a half. Douchebag Project Solutions lost bit after bit that they'd been banking on winning. A couple of their ongoing active projects started having serious operational problems, unpaid subs walking off sites in protest, massive change orders piling up, angry clients threatening immediate litigation. Their bonding company started asking very uncomfortable questions and eventually drastically reduced their bonding capacity, which effectively meant they couldn't even legally bid on larger projects anymore. The pervasive word in the industry was that Douchebag Project Solutions was rapidly circling the drain, and then the final fatal blow landed. Richard had apparently taken out extremely significant loans to finance the company's daily operations during the lean months, foolishly banking on winning those new contracts to cover the mounting debt. When those crucial contracts didn't materialize, the cash flow instantly dried up. He couldn't make payroll, and subcontractors started filing devastating mechanics liens. Clients on active projects started aggressively demanding performance bond claims. In March 2024, Douchebag Project Solutions officially filed for Chapter 7 bankruptcy, not Chapter 11 reorganization to try and save things, instead Chapter 7 full total liquidation. The company was completely dead. When I heard the news, I won't lie, I sat alone in my quiet office for a long time, just letting the immense weight of it wash over me. 20 years, that's all it took to get revenge and closure. The guy who only got ahead by stealing from others finally ran out of other people's work to steal. And yeah guys, if you enjoy these XXL stories, please don't forget to subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. The next one is another malicious compliance story, which is titled Boss says contractors can only have one smoke break during our shift. So a little background, I work on a building site. We are renovating a building on a university to be ready for the students in September, so we are on a pretty tight schedule. Despite this, we've been making good time. I work on the electrical team with 6 engineers, including me and the supervisor, and we had just finished installing some lights, so me and the 2 others headed off to the smoke shelter while the supervisor set up the next job. There's no general policy when it comes to smoke breaks. As long as you're getting your work done in a reasonable amount of time, you're pretty much free to do whatever as long as you don't take the piss. This helps to keep work morale high. We generally take about 5 minutes, and as we are standing there talking, the site manager walks past us. He didn't say anything, but we could feel him staring daggers into us. We just smiled and continued talking. After we finished, we walked back on site and get our next task. The day continues as normal. The next day, we are informed by the supervisor that we will only be allowed to take 1 smoke break per day, and we would need to let him know before we took it. We protested, but supervisor told us it was out of his hands. While we actually only took around 3 out of 4 smoke breaks, there was a noticeable drop in the morale for the day. Little did they know I was planning my revenge. A few years prior, I took a trip to Cuba and brought back some cigars. I slipped 3 into my bag before I set off to work the next day, and we finish off a task and let the supervisor know that we are taking our smoke break for the day. I headed straight for the break room to grab my cigars. I meet my co-workers at the shelter. Barely able to contain my smile, I ask, "Hey, wanna try a cigar?" Their faces light up as they realize my malicious compliance. They told us we could only have 1 smoke break. They didn't say how long. About 15 minutes in and our cigar's halfway finished, the site manager spots us and comes over to ask what the heck we thought we were doing. We just told him we are taking our smoke break and we just wanted to make the most of it. He let out a loud laugh and we continued talking for a while. He let us know that people high up in the company were not happy with the progression even though we were ahead of schedule. So we told him how we usually take smoke breaks between tasks and how this would not affect our productivity, and he gave us permission to take smoke breaks whenever we want now, since we seem like good people. So just don't bring any cigars and don't tell the other workers. Our supervisor nearly doubled over with laughter when we told him, and yeah, it was dumb, and yeah, we could have lost our jobs over this. We are lucky that he had a good sense of humor. Was it worth it to see the look on his face though? Absolutely. And the next one is a malicious compliance story that is titled, "My brother-in-law told me to stop asking where everything goes in his house and just use common sense." So my sister and her husband bought a house last fall, and ever since then, visiting them has felt like walking into a very nice Airbnb run by one irritated man. He has a rule for everything, but only after you break it. Shoes by the bench, except not that side of the bench, because that side is for the dog leash. Mugs in the blue cabinet, except not the front half, because those are for guests. Dish towels on the oven handle, except one of them is decorative somehow. Last weekend I was there helping my sister paint the spare room, and by noon I'd already been corrected 4 times for putting things in the wrong place. When I asked where he wanted the paint tray washed, he sighed and said, "You don't need a guided tour every minute. Just use common sense and act like you live here." So I said okay, I really did say it nicely, because at that point I was getting annoyed too. So then I acted like I lived there. I rinsed the tray in the big utility sink, used a roll of paper towel under it, put the dog food scoop back in the bin with the food, and stacked the dried dishes in the cabinet that was literally next to the sink. About 20 minutes later he came downstairs looking like his soul had left his body. The paper towels were apparently for garage spills only, the scoop cannot touch the food because of germs even though it lives in the food bin, and the cabinet I used was not for plates, it was for serving pieces. My sister started laughing so hard she had to sit on the stairs. He said that I was being smart with him and I told him no, I was just using common sense and acting like I lived there. Now there are labels inside half the kitchen, which honestly seems definitely easier for everybody. And yeah guys, that dude sounds like a nightmare to live with. Thank you for watching, I will see you again tomorrow.